See you next time.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, UCY TV listeners. Welcome, Truth Frequency Radio. This is the Liam Scheff Show. Are you in any way under the illusion that you live in a free country? You hear the airplane going on out there? I have tried to talk about sex, religion, oil decline. When I talk about oil decline, people tell me that we'll be saved by free alien technology. When I ask them where it is, they say it'll be there just in time. When I talk about sex and say that we essentially make ourselves slaves by binding ourselves genitally to one person through life, as though that's the same thing as love, respect, kindness, integrity, I'm told, well, that this is at best a personal decision and at worst a blasphemy. When I try to point out the technical, intellectual, critical arguments, it's very difficult to get people to listen. Although, some do, to their credit. And when I talk about religion, the world's great Harry Potterisms, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, you know, the fantasies that people actually believe are real, the Spider-Man movies that people grant as being true, although nobody ever saw them, there's no known authors, no known particular dates that anything was written, and it doesn't really matter, because if you believe it, everybody to you who doesn't believe it is a liar and a heretic and a bad person. Because why? Because they don't believe what you believe? Maybe you didn't always believe it, but you're not allowed to talk about that. Or you're going to be beat up by the apologetists. I went on the Robert Scott Bell Show, one of my favorite shows. A good friend, dear friend. 2 weeks ago, we recorded a show for 2 weeks ago. It was an interview about an article I wrote called New Creative Love During Marriage. And in the article, I asked people to consider what marriage is, what marriage was, where it comes from. I invoked the dark seed of Leviticus in the Old Testament, which is where most of our ideas of filial and matrimonial duty come from, which usually involve killing a woman who does anything that other than what the guy tells her to do, killing men who are homosexuals, etc. In that charming document, you can find many admonitions, some of which make sense, most of which don't. Not cutting your hair in a certain way, not cutting your beard in a certain way, rubbing fat this way or that. You can read it. You can read it for yourself. It's all there on the internet these days. You can read good criticisms of it too, and maybe I'll start giving out those websites because why not? Why not? I'll look some of them up during the break, and I'll come back in the second half hour with those. But I did the interview on the Robert Scott Bell Show. He loved it. I loved it. And then one of the more religious advertisers, some of the people in the background, read the article and just felt that it was absolute blasphemy and went at Robert very hard. And he, I believe, was forced, more or less, to decide that he couldn't run the interview, but he very kindly handed it over to me, and that is what you're about to hear. So, without further ado, here is part one of my interview on the Robert Scott Bell Show last week.
Revolution, and right now we're joined by my good friend, and now
a relationship kind of guy. We're talking about a resolution for relationships. A lot of people are thinking about that, and we're going to explore them today. There's an article up at robertscottbell.com, linked through by Liam Scheff, talking about just those things. Those things, pesky relationships. Do they have to be pesky? Let's find out. Liam, welcome. Happy New Year.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And I shall note before we begin officially that if you hear some background noise, Liam is with us courtesy of Post Haste Pharmacy down there in Fort Lauderdale area, which we've been at many times over the years. So if you hear any little background noise, don't worry. He's just being passed by probably by some of the pharmacists and healers that are at the Post Haste Pharmacy.
Yes, they run video to tell you what's wrong with you, what's right with you, and how to do both and either and neither, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and also a shout out to our good friend Trish, because she does a lot of work out of Post Haste Pharmacy in support of all the GMO or anti-GMO initiatives that are going on in Florida down there.
Indeed, Trish Sheldon is a wonderful friend of ours and of the show, and she told me the current proposed amendment agenda, whatever, and I have no idea what it is. So please look up, if you're in Florida, look up GMO, legal activity, etc.
Yeah. By the way, I have to admit I'm a little bit excited having you on, Liam. Don't get nervous. It's been so long.
I know. Well, listen, I used to be on the show like when we lived in Fort Lauderdale. I was on the show 3-4 days a week, and then I was traveling all around. I'd be on twice a week, and I was in LA, and I was on once a week, and now I've been out of internet, and it's been weeks. So let's go.
We've got a lot of catch up to do. Now, coming to the theme of the new year.
Cut the mustard.
Right, cut to the mustard. The idea of a New Year's resolution surrounding relationships. Some people just want to be in one. Some people are in one, want to make it better, change it up, do it differently. Some people are stuck in paleo perspectives on relationships. We've covered a little bit on the air with you and have some publications of articles that are leading to your next book. And this new article also taking it to another level. If we talk about a New Year's resolution to do relationships differently, would that be something you're helping folks to do?
I think that I'm taking them on the journey. Whether they want to come is up to them.
Yes.
I have at this point opened my own world up to understanding what I am better. I read a book called Sex at Dawn, which is not about sex in the morning, but it's about it's about the anthropological basis for human relationships. So it looks at the biological, the impact of human biology and how we came about as a species over hundreds of thousands of years. We've been a human species for hundreds of thousands of years, as far as anybody can tell. Our immediate cousins were around, very much like us for millions of years. And if you look at the biology of the human animal, like 97% of animals on Earth, you would come to the very quick conclusion that we're not in any way a sexually monogamous species, that we're really built to have, I'd say, to have variability in how we breed, probably for the best health of our offspring. And that we're a more socially bonded tribal species than any kind of nuclear family-bound species. The nuclear family was something invented in essentially the 1950s after World War II. Before that, people lived in very large extended families.
Liam, is that the time or an era where that concept of good fences make good neighbors came about?
The Robert Frost poem? Mm-hmm. Well, good fences make good neighbors is sort of an American idea. It's pretty Germanic as well. Mm-hmm. You've traveled in Africa,
yes,
and you know that what we do here is really very different from what any tribe in the world does.
Oh, radically different. My visits to West Africa twice were some of my most extraordinarily heart-opening experiences in this lifetime. And I'm not saying that exaggerating even in the slightest. I've had profound experiences there with the open hearts of the people that I was received into their homes, and there was more of a tribal aspect to it. And I don't make any negative connotation about that at all. It was a beautiful thing, and I had great experiences there. Now, culturally, of course, radically different on many levels. We can talk about it. But in that way, I felt an openness and a welcoming that we don't normally or naturally have, I could say it that way, because we sort of live a little bit artificially in this realm. We've removed ourselves from it. But there was just kind of a naturalness to the openness.
Right. we don't live tribally, but we're a tribal species. And so the problem immediately presents itself that we've created a set of rules that really comes from an ancient herding culture, a culture that pushed animals around. And this was the ancient Hebrew culture that was on the run from really being a servant class in Babylon, which is, Iraq, back to the Levant, back to now what is Palestine, Israel, somewhere in the 800s, 700s, 1000 BC, something like that. And they wrote all this stuff down. And they wrote this thing called Leviticus. And Leviticus is essentially the Code of Hammurabi. It's the same concept that you get in many herding tribes like the Maasai. Tribes of people that push animals about tend to feel that they own women. Women are possessions of the man. Men are usually polygynous. They have many wives, and the sex lives of wives is very circumscribed, held pretty tightly because everything is capital based. And capita, by the way, a capita means from the Latin means the head of a cattle. So if all you're worried about is the cattle, and we talked about this on a previous show that you actually played either last week or this week as a repeat.
Yes.
When all you're obsessed about is that, then you really lose track of human dynamics, human relationships. Then you look at a foraging tribe. Foraging tribes have much looser relationship structures. And in foraging tribes, sexuality is something that people do to enjoy themselves. In herding tribes, it's something that they do to enjoy themselves, but often at their own peril because there's so many rules about it. Men can generally do what they want. And that's the same thing in our culture. Men do what they want. There's a strip club for every occasion. There's a pornography channel and people think that I don't do that. But you watch HBO and you watch True Blood and The Sopranos and Mad Men. Everybody's sort of having their little mental affairs all over the place. But we pretend that we don't. So I'm sort of tired of the pretense, and I'm essentially saying I'm a terribly monogamous person. I have very important relationships. I value those relationships highly. Not everybody can, I don't have a million spots open for very important relationships. I have a very few. They require a great deal of investment of psychological, emotional, intellectual time. I have to trust these people, but I don't imagine that I own somebody by the genitals just because I care about them.
Well, I mean, here, let me just go back to something in the Western culture that we learned about growing up. The concept, and maybe it's not unique to the West. I don't know. You tell me with your exploration of this, the sowing your wild oats context. Go out and have fun now because now you're going to commit to one person and that's all over. That part of your life is done. And you just kind of shut down like the physical function or the chakra, the energetic centers. Is that unique to the West?
No, what's unique to the West is the lie that it happens once. What they're admitting to you is that you're not. I'm so glad you said that, by the way. I'm going to put that in the book. The West is absolutely a polyamorous society. We have love affairs all the time. We put it into the television, we put it into the movies, we put it into people, and we tease ourselves. Well, I just made out with that person, so it doesn't really count. Or, well, that was at a businessman's convention, so I don't really have to. And what's the most famous advertising campaign for you're not really monogamous? What happens in Vegas?
Stays in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
That's the big, that's it. And of course, wink,
break.
wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more.
Right. Every movie that we watch it tells us that this thing doesn't really work. People sort of pretend to try to make it work. Some people really work hard. Then they get crazy, they get neurotic, they get ingrown, they're too obsessed with one person. Every bit of they lose, the flexibility and fluidity of the tribal life of having many important friendships, because, they become hyper fixated and hyper vigilant in the direction of one person. Well, this just makes people neurotic. And if you want to find neurotic people, just walk around America. But this sowing of the wild oats concept exists in every culture. This is a leftover from agricultural societies. Now, herding societies, like the Maasai tribe in Africa, for example, they have a childhood in which you're just a kid and you can, kids are allowed to, in most tribes, to be more action and even sexual with kids than we would consider like godly or appropriate, but nobody cares because they're kids. Like nobody's going to get pregnant. So like do whatever you want. that's kid world, and adults don't mingle there. One of the strange things about our society is that adult and kid world overlaps too much. Kids aren't allowed to just go and be in kid world like you and I were when we were growing up. The lessons that we learned together, growing up, with the 12, 13-year-old was the oldest in the group, and the 6, 7-year-old was the youngest in the group, and we would go and have adventures, and, essentially the older kids became like parents, and, we just learned a lot together. It wasn't always perfect, but we learned a lot. Well, we don't do that anymore. We're not allowed to do that anymore. And we've been whittled down to this nuclear family idea, which I think is problematic. The wild oats thing, though, in the Maasai culture happens when they reach the age of sexual, it's hard to call it maturity, but at least sexual, whatever you would call it, readiness. They're 14, something like that, 15. They're supposed to rack up the numbers now. So they go out and they rack up the numbers, and the boys try to get up to 10 or 15, and the girls probably get up to 3 or 4. And then they perform a violent act on the girls called a female genital circumcision, and then the girls are married. Now, after the girls in the Maasai tribe are married, at that point, they're the property essentially of a man, but then they're allowed to have a special friend throughout their life. Now, she may even give birth to one of these special friends' children, who the husband will treat a little more poorly than the rest of the kids. But
dude, hold on. I'm so interested in this, I lost track of time. We got to take a break here. Liam Scheff is on. Happy New Year, everybody. Relationship resolutions after this.
In the health world through the power of radio. It's the Robert Scott Bell Show.
Oating some wild sows here on the Robert Scott Bell Show. Here is that. Oh, wait, I got it backwards. Liam, correct me. Please correct me.
People talk about how bad it was, in the Middle Ages. And besides the few plague years, and, there were a few dozen plague years, it wasn't all that bad. You farmed your land with a group of people. You had to work a number of hours per day. The religion was everywhere, but it wasn't what you think. You had 1 million saints for anything that you wanted, and you had a third of the year, 100-something days of the year, 130, 40, 50 days of the year being religious holidays. Those are days in which you get plenty drunk, dance and sing, and screw. You might fall into the bushes somewhere and have an experience that's not totally approved of by the church and state, and that was well understood. And if you don't believe me, read Chaucer, read Canterbury Tales, read The Wife of Bath. The Western world is full of every exception to the so-called rule of, strict religious monogamy that makes the rule look absolutely foolish, which it is. The medieval church was criticized for essentially being a place to house brothels. Brothels and churches, brothels and monasteries went hand in hand. We only get our modern sense of, this sort of strange Levitical marriage. I mean, this was only held by the freakishly puritanical who were booted out of England. But somehow people imagine, they don't understand what marriage is. And in my new article, I try to explain, marriage is whatever it started as, and in the end, it's a long-term stabilizing relationship that doesn't have anything to do with you impeding the development of enjoyable romantic relationships through your whole life. No, but I mean, nobody ever understood marriage to be something that would impede you from enjoying affectionate relationships with other people before, a series of historical events. But it's not in our foraging biological nature to just kill romance or attraction, affection in our soul, in ourselves, just because we've been in a 20-year relationship.
Liam, I've asked you this before, but I want to ask again. Who benefits? You always say follow the money, but who benefits by conforming society into such a realm of denial of humanity, I guess, in this way, to restrict your relationships or friendships, even affectionate ones, in this way? Who benefits by this?
men would seem to on the surface, because mostly they're managing the lives of women, but in the end, we turn men against women and women against men. And the only people that benefits are the divorce lawyers, the church, and the government, because as our friend Joni Abbott of Homegrown Health says, church and state are hardly separate. Church is protected under 501c3 status. They don't have to pay taxes for all of the billions of dollars that they make worldwide. Not a tax dollar paid. And the government, when you swear, even in a civil court, your, lifelong whatever you think you're doing with somebody, to be their eternal co-pilot on every family trip that you make together, your eternal co-bill payer, your eternal co-taxpayer, your eternal therapist, your eternal, sick person. And now you're not allowed to have many of these people. God forbid you should have many people in your life to help you with all of these impossible tasks. God forbid we should actually be the tribal species that we are and make ourselves sane. Mm-hmm. No, you just need the one person. Well, I guess the psychiatrists benefit, the medical industry benefits, the military industrial complex benefits, because we need oil to fill in all of the gaps that we used to fill in for each other in terms of work, building, supplying, nurturing.
But in a patriarchal culture, would we then say, or would there be an argument to be made that it provides stability for the moms, right? The women, right? You've heard that.
It's a tender trap. Mothers go crazy sitting at home. Women on the verge of a nervous breakdown is a well-understood trope in every culture that practices the Western fake monogamy system, because men are allowed to go out and do what they want. Men can whore around all they want. I don't care what anybody says. I've known too many guys, and I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. Men whore around as they want to. Women, though, hold themselves in gossip clutches with extreme anxiety to make sure that they don't step out of line. And so they become neurotic, develop eating and drinking disorders, and, read romance novels waiting for their prince to come back home. Meanwhile, the guy is slaving away at some miserable job.
Okay, all right. Now we're painting a wonderful picture for the new year with Liam Scheff. We got to take another break. I'm going to ask Liam about how this is being met with on an interpersonal basis. He talks to people in relationships. Is there resistance? Is there acceptance? Is there, I don't know. This is a fascinating discussion, and we're going to continue it on the other side of this break. So stick with us. The links are up, including to the new article by Liam at robertscottbell.com. We'll be right back.
Scandalous. Shocking. What was it that guy was saying? Banned. Well, at least one episode banned. Censored from the Robert Scott Bell Show. With an understanding that there are economic considerations and not finger pointing, and I'm not even really very angry about it. I appreciate Robert and producer Don sharing the file obligingly, gracefully, even though they weren't able to run it because of religious blowback. Yes, religious blowback. It's the friend of free speech. It's religious blowback. Do you have something to say? You can't say it. If you disagree with us, you're a horrible liar. It's religion. It's just the way they roll, folks. You're either with them or you're with Al-Qaeda, I guess. Or you're either with Al-Qaeda or you're against them. One of the things I like to point out is that this Old Testament stuff, which Christians disavow, by the way, which is clever, do you understand that Christianity gets away with, sort of text murder? They claim the Old Testament, and then they disavow the Old Testament. So they say that they don't live by Leviticus, but believe me, they live by Leviticus. They say that they're not into the control of people and things and objects and everybody to agree with them, but of course they are. So are the vaccine police. This isn't just a religious, it's not just a mindset particular to Christianity. It's in Hinduism, it's in Islam, it's in any ism. It's in scientism. It's in the halls of the vaccine police, the HIV test police. If you don't believe what these people who've granted themselves authority, these priests, say, I guess you're a bad person. They'll just come up with anything they can. It doesn't really matter. They used to slander you for being gay or for being promiscuous, and now they'll slander you for whatever they want to slander you for. It doesn't really matter, libel, slander. It doesn't matter, because all they need to do is satisfy themselves that they don't like you and there's some ethical reason for not liking you. So, that's the way it is. We will rejoin the interview, which I thought was wonderful, and I think Robert loved it too, in the second half hour This is the Liam Scheff Show on Truth Frequency Radio and UCY TV. You can find my book, Official Stories, a corrective textbook to all the, special fibs we were taught in school. American history, no, sorry, CIA. JFK, lone gunman, no, sorry, CIA. 9/11, 19 hijackers, no, sorry. Doesn't really work that way. We needed to get into the Middle East. Vaccination saves lives, no, sorry. Injecting poison into people's bodies doesn't really save their life. HIV tests don't really work. What's next? Big Bang Theory, invented by a priest, not really a science, not testable. Shakespeare, didn't own any of the works of Shakespeare when he died, probably didn't write them. Plate tectonics, the Earth is shrinking and growing at exactly the same rate of speed. Really? Seems awfully convenient. Maybe that's not true. And Darwinian evolution, that change is successive and accidental. Slight successive and accidental, and that's how everything happens? Really? Why do we have to invoke accident? Why can't we invoke mind? Why can't we invoke spiritual intelligence? Why can't we invoke the nature of the fractal-shaped universe, figured as it is by lightning and electricity in every avenue and every corner? You can find the book on Amazon.com and create space under Official Stories. This is the Liam Scheff Show. We will be back with you in a moment. Now, here's Liam with a UCY exclusive. Yes, we're reading from 1001 Questions to Ask Before You Get Married, because you only get that one person, and then you're totally responsible to each other forever and ever, and you own each other's genitals, and if you fail in any way, you're a total shameful failure, a slut, and a whore. Chapter 17, Raising a Baby. Aside from being a full-time job, parenting requires that you and your spouse take on the roles of chefs, teachers, doctors, and taxi drivers. It may take a village to raise a child, but you and your spouse will be doing most of the work yourselves. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we killed the tribe. Answer the following questions with your partner. If your answers differ, decide on mutually acceptable answers to all of the following questions. Number 1, who will get up to comfort and feed your crying baby during the night? What would they do in a tribe? Well, the baby would be sleeping with the parents, so nobody would have to get up. The baby would be next to you, and there would be all kinds of mothers who were already pregnant, so somebody might be up, or breastfeeding or something like that. So it wouldn't just fall on the two parents, but now that we're in a safe nuclear family, isolated in our suburban houses with cable TV and Netflix and Amazon Prime, somebody's got to get up in the middle of the night. Number 2, who will take on the primary responsibility of disciplining your children? Will your parenting style be similar to any of your parents or someone else? Do you believe children should be raised to fear and respect their elders and authority? Hey, Old Testament. Will you strive to be your children's friend more than being a parental figure? Describe your parenting style. Have you ever said, I want to give my kids everything I never had growing up? If so, what was lacking in your childhood? Let's see. Generation differences. Do you want your children to have all the latest toys and games? How do you feel about spanking a child? Do you know in foraging cultures they don't hit their kids, but in herding cultures they beat their children? That's interesting. Which culture do you think we live in? Do you and your partner plan on being strict disciplinarians? I told you no, little Roger. I told you no. Psh, psh, psh. No, Mommy, no. What priorities in life will you try to impress upon your children? Describe how you would discipline your child for a minor offense. What do you consider a minor offense? Describe a moderate and serious offense, the corresponding disciplinary actions that you would take. Describe the differences between discipline and child abuse. Uh-oh. Well, that's a good place to pause, isn't it? I think a lot of people don't know the difference. Again, foraging cultures don't hit their kids. Herding cultures abuse their kids and enslave their women. Which one do you think we live in? This is Liam Scheff. We're back now. Tick, tick, tick. Welcome back to the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. Yes, it is your host, Saint Liam. What terrible things I must have done to get this show banned from the Robert Scott Bell Show. My friend, Robert Scott Bell, truly, longtime and irreplaceable friend, does a wonderful show on Natural News Radio, GCN, other networks. I've been a frequent guest, co-host, etc. We did a show last week, 2 weeks ago. We recorded a show about this article I've written called New Creative Love During Marriage. New Creative Love During Marriage, which is, I don't know, sort of a tease, a prefiguring of my upcoming book, title to be released soon. I got to keep working hard every day on it to get it done. Whip, whip, crack that whip. And I argue that if you really wanted to enslave people, especially a species that thinks about and enjoys sex and sensuality and contact, love, affection, regularly, all the time, every day, the best way to enslave an animal species, a human species like that, would be to tell them that their instincts are deplorable and in fact sinful and must be contained and constrained and controlled by the religio-government complex. Well, that's exactly where we live. So you see the little kids, the little girls especially, waiting to be rescued by that prince, doing all the princess dress-up stuff so that they can be with the one guy who will make all their dreams come true. Total fiction. And then we watch one guy going to the altar with one woman and his friends saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, we're so happy for you, you're miserable like us. Well, not entirely miserable. There are good things, of course, about any long-term relationship. In fact, they're wonderful things. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the permission that you're asking for is to own somebody by the genitals and to have them own you by the genitals. So I talked about this on the show, and I talked about some of the so-called religious backdrop for it. Religion seems to be sort of a front operation for mind control, as far as I can tell. It's different than philosophy or even spirituality. It's just a way that people deal with insecurities about life, death, and other processes to it, which are big questions, no doubt. But to frame them as though something written at an undetermined time in history by people that we can't name is the ultimate answer should make you bob your head up and down wondering, where did they get this information? So we did this show, and it was banned from the Robert Scott Bell Show. Banned from the Robert Scott Bell Show. But Robert, being the generous guy that he is, and producer Don, being the generous guy that he is, decided to let it run. They gave it to me, and I'm allowed to run it, of course, because that's the kind of guys they are. So without further adieu, ici le show.
But we're glad to be with you, Liam, as it's been a while. Your continued exploration into relationships, of course, challenging status quo and official stories is what you do. And we tend to do that as well. But, sometimes it's a bit awkward addressing certain things like the belief that relationships should be this way and not that way, or that way and not this way.
Right. Well, it's awkward for people to hear that vaccination is probably not a good idea, that HIV tests don't work, that 9/11 was clearly, devised to get us to do a certain thing politically. People don't like to hear these things, but I suppose I kept going down through the list, and I finally got to marriage. And I said, well, wait a second. I never wanted to be married. Helen was my partner, and I never wanted to be married because we recognized it as a kind of slavery. Once you're in this, somebody wrote this thing over the last 10,000 years. This thing, whatever it is that they read, over the last 10,000 years in agricultural society, they wrote this thing. You're owned by this person, you're owned by this person, and what do you get to say? I mean, you got 10,000 years, and this priest who you don't know, or maybe you do, stands up and reads this thing that he didn't write, and you get 2 words.
2 words?
I do.
Which ones?
I do.
I do.
Okay. You don't get to say, I'd like to amend subsection 5, Article 3.
Well, the thing is, Liam, we wrote our own contract, our relationship contract. And I think that's something I'd like people to engage in, because you're really now partaking in being a co-worker, so to speak, as opposed to just blindly following somebody's orders. As you said, who wrote them? We don't know. We're just doing them. Why? Well, we've always done them. I'm not that way. And I know you're not. A lot of folks are questioning a lot of things, and it scares some folks to question certain institutions. Like I'll question the government, but I'm not questioning that. Right. And we're not telling you what to do here. We're just kind of relating these things.
So let's talk about the hard stuff, and this is what people want to know. What about sex? And they say, well, does it, to 10 years, 20 years into a relationship, your sex drive is for your partner is dwindled. There's unless you're one of that rare 0.00001%, the likelihood that you had what you started as kids is gone. I also like to explain to people that there are really 4 kinds of relationships. There's a friend relationship, a best friend relationship, a business partner relationship, and a lover relationship. When you're lovers with somebody because you just want to consume each other, essentially. You kind of can't get enough of each other's pheromones. When you're a business partner because you get a lot of work done. When you're a best friend because you want to hear everything, not just the things that, don't bother you or whatever, but everything. And when you're a friend because you want to hear some things and not hear some things. So everybody comes in these categories, and some people are best friends and, business partners. Most couples are friends and lovers. Most couples are not best friends, because if they were, they would tell each other everything, but they can't. They're not able to. They restrict a lot. And now that I've been talking about this, and I've actually ended up talking with some couples, this is what I'm finding. They want to be able to open up more, and they risk it, and one partner feels one way and one feels another, and I say, okay, well, now you at least have heard each other.
Well, I mean, is it possible that the mystical, spiritual love can overcome these differences? That there's a way that
No, that's nonsense. I'm sorry, that's just absolute nonsense. Forgive me, but the Greeks...
No, maybe I'm not making myself clear. And tell me, maybe you're perceiving it right.
No, I'm not saying that to you. I get this...
No, I guess what I'm saying is that you come to a point where you have a disagreement like that, and you find that one person is suddenly open to some other concept of the relationship. Does the other go, I love you enough to let go of my attachment?
I apologize. I thought, can mystical, spiritual love overcome the desire to be human?
No. I wasn't going there. That's why I kind of had a sense about it. Because I'm feeling like people do, maybe they enter and they're really in love. Honestly, they have this heartfelt connection, and then suddenly someone recognizes, wait, I've got this thing that's just not happening here. And can there be that something that can overwhelm our limitations, our fears, our attachments?
I think that the discussion of what people really are, that's why I try to offer people these categories. Are we best friends, lovers, or business partners? Every family is a business partnership. Every marriage is a business partnership after the first kid comes. Mm-hmm. Your ability to be a lover is reduced significantly. Nobody will tell you otherwise. After the second kid comes, give me a break. Some people manage to be, but they probably started as lovers and they make room for it. Most people, we're not really told, though, to pick somebody because they're a great lover. I mean, the romantic notion is that you marry somebody because they're a great lover, but the practical notion is you better shop around because you have to do so many things with this person. We have so much weight in our choosing. I read on my own radio show, the Liam Scheff Show, for fun and amusement, this book called 1,001 Questions to Ask Before Getting Married by Monica Mendes-Leahy, which is just an absurd list of things that you're supposed to demand of one person.
Mm-hmm.
It's pure mental illness. We're a tribal species. We need at least a dozen people around us to even survive comfortably. We need about 25 in a tribe, anything less than that, you just feel incestuous and psychologically overwhelmed. You get tired of people. Not everybody's good at everything. In this culture, nobody's good at anything except using the computer. Nobody's good at anything anymore. That's real, farming.
Well, yeah, no, those are the rare exceptions to the rule in our culture. Those that have expertise can actually build things or grow things, and that's part of, again, your mission that I found to work into the permaculture realm. What I want to embrace more is we're doing a little bit in our place where we are now, and I'm encouraging my children to learn these skills that were lost to our culture.
You are. Now, in talking, you are, and I know that, and I guess I'm doing permaculture and building gardens to encourage people too. I don't know what kind of timeline we have for oil decline and nuclear power plant disaster, but, we do what we can. Mm-hmm. You asked, though, I wanted to get back to this question.
Sure.
You're in a relationship for a while, and you realize that your sex life maybe it's good, but maybe you just really like somebody else. What do you do? I think that the idea that we're given culturally that you have to obliterate and suicide one good relationship in order to experience another is poison. I think that it's manipulation of us. I think that it pits us against each other and weakens us as a group. I think it's a top-down manipulation from the church and state. I think it's disgusting.
Well, and as you said also, the divorce lawyers benefit. I mean, there's so many, let's say, profitability in that whole angst or suiciding relationships over desire.
There is,
yeah.
but now people may not understand what I just said. I think it's disgusting that that we're supposed to kill one relationship just to enjoy another romance. So here's what I suggest in my article, that romances are part of life. That they start out hot and then they cool down and they become friendships. That's the way it always happens. There's no mystery there. Once you're old enough, you'll realize that no matter how hot your relationship starts, you'll find the places that work, the places that don't work, and it will cool down to a friendship. It may remain a sexual friendship, but it will still be a friendship, or it won't exist because you weren't actually really good friends. You just were lovers. That's why lovers is a category. You can be lovers with somebody, and that can be a great experience, but you may not really be good friends. And it's terrible to mistake a lover for somebody who's trying to be your best friend. It's terrible to marry somebody that you don't have a friendship with. Helen was my best friend, and we were, essentially married. We were partners for 7 years. We weren't great lovers. I don't mean we were awful. I just mean that wasn't our primary driving force. And I think we both probably were better lovers with other people. And as strange as that sounds, we had a beautiful, wonderful, long-lasting relationship that would be going to this day if she hadn't passed.
Was that, if I may ask, let's say, a difficult part of the relationship because you didn't have this kind of insight and you hadn't digested a lot of what you're talking and communicating now to say, wait, why is it that we're such good friends and not so great here? Is this a conflict? How are we going to do this?
Yeah, we struggled sometimes with that. And I often felt like a failure, and I felt like I was letting her down. We would talk, and we hugged and laid on each other and cuddled constantly. So there was no lack of affection. It was just that some people make you sexually crazy and some don't.
Right. Well, and as you're saying that, I'm sure there are a lot of folks out there that have experienced situations like that. You have a deep affection and a deep love. We've been friends for a long time, and this was your life that you perceived growing old together.
Oh, yeah.
And I know devastation you went through when she was gone.
Yeah.
And so, yet at the same time, you're acknowledging that it wasn't the everything on every aspect of life with this woman.
No. I had one of my best girlfriends I ever had. I had when I was with Helen, and I had a great 6 month sort of fun relationship. I'm still friends with that person, a dear friend. Helen knew her, and it was a little strange and a little awkward, but we just dealt with it by talking. We just would sit and talk, and I'd say, I really love you. I need to talk to Helen. I need to talk with you at the end of every day. So, it was a little confusing, and it ran its course with the other person because we were great lovers and we were friends, but we weren't best friends, and I wanted to be with my best friend. Now, some people sit there and say, well, why didn't you choose? Well, why don't you? We're supposed to be able to be free. We're supposed to be able to, a choice, killing every impulse is not a choice. Killing every impulse toward affection with people that you really care about is not a choice. That's a programming decision made by other people. And we've inherited that through Leviticus, which is an old, leftover, dusty bit of anti-female, anti-male, anti-homosexual diatribe against herding, from a herding culture from 3000 BC.
I feel like I need to reiterate too that this is not a discussion of wanting to return to the what was the 60s sexual revolution either. We're not talking about free love and just dropping in the sack with anybody, because that is not something that is fulfilling, and it has some downsides.
No, I'm not talking about being blind or uninvolved. I'm actually saying that we have these impulses toward meaningful relationships for a reason. It's because the spiritual heart and center of the universe draws us in different directions. We meet somebody to be a friend, a new business partner, a new best friend, a new lover for a period of time, to enliven us, to teach us a spiritual lesson. And by the way, how great would it be, instead of having to rely on insurance companies, if we knew that our wife or husband had 3 or 4 people who were very close with her or him, in case anything ever happened to us, that our beloved had a deep social network that rooted them and protected them. We don't have to.
That was one of the big questions I had as well, because right now you're isolated in this nuclear tribe, as you say. It's very small and limited. And that's part of the concern that often women have, and not exclusively, but often have, that there's no stability. What happens if I lose and then it becomes an artificial economic thing like insurance, as opposed to a community that would care for each other.
Insurance and food stamps and welfare, or if you have money, then you're, I guess, lucky, but you're alone.
We got to take another break here. We're going to wrap up, head into the weekend. It is the new year on the Robert Scott Bell Show, and this relationship topic, it is going to be something we cover a lot in this 2015 year. Stick around. More to go with Liam Scheff. Our mission here on the Robert Scott Bell Show is to challenge authority and authoritarians. And as Liam, you said so well, in certain areas people are okay with it, in other areas they're not. Everybody seems to have one place, maybe 2 or 3, that they can't go or won't go. But if you talk to them in a quiet way, interpersonally, when no one else is listening, then they'll go, yeah, you're kind of right there, Liam, right? How often does that happen?
It's very regular. I can even tell you that the very religious people I've spoken with will admit that, there was a point where they weren't, and now they really are trying very hard to.
Okay.
There's a point where I wasn't, but then I became godly. One of the problems, and I pointed out in the article, is that our concept of religion comes from a culture that we wouldn't want to emulate. We're essentially emulating a culture whose values were closer to Al-Qaeda than any modern sense of the world that we would really want to live in. And I'm talking about these ancient Middle Eastern herding cultures that lived in a world that we don't want to inhabit, and we don't really have to. So why we decide that we have to own each other, that the minute somebody has a heart, a feeling, a romantic feeling that is love and excitement and passion for somebody, and it's not us. I want to get rid of the idea that you have to break up with somebody who you really do love, who you do value, just to experience the passion of life again. Now, Europeans have been getting around this for a long time. They just go, yeah, go have your vacation.
Right. But there's a certain level of maturity at that point where you can communicate this and you're not destroyed by it. And I feel like in many ways our culture is still very immature. in our interaction. I mean, if you look at politics, the immaturity there. You look at medicine, the immaturity in understanding what the immune system really is. So why would it be different when we talk relationships? And and I don't think our audience here is necessarily puerile in that sense that they'd go, oh, this is all about sex. This is so much more than that. This is about honesty and communication. As you said, an anthropological perspective on humanity, if you will, and the way we interact. And where we've corrupted it from an authoritarian power structure that has limited our experience, not necessarily for the better, although at the same time we're not looking to go to another extreme. That's why I brought up the whole free love of the 60s. That's also not what we're talking about.
No, that's a drag. It's just a drag, and you'll get the clap. So, yeah, don't do that. I mean, it's really, when I was growing up, you were given two options. Either you believed in the free love thing, or you were sort of normal and believed that you would meet the one person in a fairy tale world who eventually you would pay all your taxes with. They're both nonsense. We fall in love over and over again in life. And falling in love is God or the universe or the spiritual center of the universe going, look, here's a lesson for you. Here's a helper in life. Here's a partner to help you get things done. There are partners that you're going to build a house with and live in a house with and raise kids with. There are partners that you're going to have great intellectual journeys with, and there are partners that you're going to build a business with. And sometimes those will have the attractions that lead to deeper affections. And so what? Mm-hmm. You're a grown-up. Don't give anybody herpes, don't get herpes, and don't get pregnant or don't get anybody pregnant by having grown-up discussions. That's not my realm. I'm not going to babysit that part of your life. But have the discussion, and have it with your steady partner, and have it with any new potential partner, and have the discussion about, if you just want to be able to kiss somebody once in a while, I get that. Then just make that your rule. I can kiss somebody once in a while. And I'll wait a day to make sure I don't have a cold sore afterward. Whatever your rule is. But we demand every right as consumers. I want 300 flavors of ice creams. I get it. But we get one variety of marriage. We wouldn't accept this at Best Buy. We wouldn't accept this at Walmart, but we accept it in the deepest, most sacred place of our personal life to have somebody dictate us the absolute rules, right. Or we're shamed, hated, criticized, and
look
reviewed.
How much we tackled as Americans communism. And I'm no fan of communism, but you can have any color of car you want as long as it's black, right? And suddenly now, wait a second, but we'll accept that lack of freedom in our relationships. Right. Interesting. Very interesting. Liam, this is, the first of many, of course, and we've already discussed a little bit of this over the last year. But if we're going to have a New Year's resolution, is to have more open and honest relationships, communicate. And I think it'll improve our culture, much less our own personal lives.
I'm excited and grateful to you, as always, for being as freedom-loving and courageous as you are, because you have a well-established audience, and many of them will wonder what we're talking about. So I invite them to think about it, to read the article, to be critical, not just of me, but of the inherited institution, and to ask the questions.
Cue the organic tomatoes. Thank you, Liam Scheff.
Shocking interview. Not really. Pretty gentle. I think fairly generous. If clear, I think. Anyway, that's a taste of what will come in the book, and I think Robert will have me back on with the book, and we'll be able to talk about it. The article is called New Creative Love During Marriage. New Creative Love During Marriage. It's there to be seen on the interweb, which is a totally owned and operated subsidiary of the military-industrial complex and Disney Corporation, Nabisco Corporation, or National Biscuit Corporation, if you like, and Raytheon, Grumman, etc., etc., etc. You're listening to the Liam Scheff Show on Truth Frequency Radio. The frequency where the truth is broadcast, and UCY TV, a place for learning, because UCY, or at least you might get some good ideas if you hang out. I want to thank all of our neighboring shows. I'm going to hopefully be on another show on UCY soon and get to know her. Oh, let's see if I can be smart, do two things at once, and remember her name. Probably not. Let's try. It is Lavon Queen Lovecat Mireles. Okay, so we'll be on her show. She seems like a lot of fun. We've got Truth or Talk on UCY. I hope to discover some of the other shows on UCY. I was on Truth Frequency Radio on their Saturday night, throwdown thing. They have a name for it, Hangar 18, and got into a tense standoff about this, where somebody was, demanding that I talk about my personal life with it. And I said, well, let's just talk about the data. And she said, well, what's your personal life about? I said, well, let's just talk about the data. And it became kind of a fight, so you can go and listen to that. And then we talked for an hour and a half afterward, and we really went through it. It was interesting, and they were much nicer, and I was much nicer than we were on the air, which, whatever. That happens that way sometimes. There are three things you can never talk about with people: religion, politics, and the great pumpkin. I'm just going to say sex and religion. Politics is easy. Oh, golly gee. The stuff I open my mouth about. I know, right? Like I ask for it, but I don't. I mean, I'm just trying to say, if you don't want to be a slave, then don't be a slave. More than that, I kind of resent an entire system that's put in place that says, white lace and promises, a kiss for luck, and we're on our way. And it's this isolating nuclear pod person nightmare that you don't get to escape from. 50-odd% of people jump out of the ship in divorce, get remarried. 75% of them or so get divorced. The remaining people who don't get divorced have whatever is going on in their lives go on, and it's pretty messy stuff. Why don't we just talk about it? Why aren't we honest? Let's be honest and talk about it. Let's tell the truth. It would be better if we didn't bind each other by the genitals, if we actually valued each other a little more than this kind of mealy-mouthed ownership of people. Don't you think? I do. Let's hear it from what I think. Hooray! Let's hear it for what you think. Hooray! See you next time. This is Liam Scheff. For the Liam Scheff Show, buy my book, Official Stories, at Amazon.com and create space. Hi, it's Liam with a UCY TV exclusive. Yes, we're reading from 1001 Questions to Ask Before You Get Married by Monica Mendez-Lee, because you only get to get married once and you have to enslave each other, so you better make sure to get it entirely right the first time or you're going to hell. Chapter 35, Saving and Spending Styles. What determines how much you'll spend at the grocery store for a new car or a new coat? When talking about money, we usually limit ourselves to two topics: what we or others have and what we or others spend. I think that's 4 topics. However, a third topic needs to be discussed: the emotional connections to money. When we understand, by the way, this isn't in the book, by the way, do you know that capita, like capitalism, comes from cattle? Capita, the head, like decapitate. We're just a cattle herding culture, beating our children and enslaving our women. When we understand what motivates us to save and spend, we can become better money managers. And God knows you better become money managers because you don't have a tribe. With your partner, ask each other the questions below and discuss your answers. Your saving style. What motivates you to save money? Does saving money make you feel good or deprived? If you were given $3,000 in cash, would you save it or spend it? Xbox fever. How concerned are you about saving for retirement? Retirement? You mean when the United States implodes? Just learn to farm. Do you have money set aside for a rainy day? Or an emergency fund in case you lose your source of income? Hello, Walmart. Given a choice between saving and spending, which do you usually choose? I don't understand this question. between saving and spending, saving and spending. Well, you have to spend money. I mean, you can't both spend and save money. That's just an advertising ploy. Save $100. No, you're spending $200. You're not saving $100 of anything. Do you actively seek out sales and bargains or clip coupons? How familiar are you with the various types of available financial investments, such as stocks, bonds, 401ks, and IRAs? Oh, it's a comedy cavalcade.